Welcome back to the Contech Onsite podcast. Super excited to host Pete Zyskowski. Pete's the Director of Design and Technology and an Associate at THW Design. And today we're going to deep dive into some of Pete's experiences, and I'm super excited to have you on, man.
Thank you. I'm super psyched to be here. My first podcast, so yeah.
Awesome. It is. It's before getting on the show, we just talking to you. I know this is gonna be a lot of fun. So we always start off with just asking, Pete, if you could tell us a little bit about you, about how, just a bit of a background so you can all relate to you.
Yeah. Why does anybody want to listen to me? So my background is architecture. I have a master's degree in architectural design and also a postgraduate degree, one from University of Strathclyde and in Scotland, and one from University of Florida, and obviously Florida. And so, yeah, I was going to go be a big old architect and whatever, and just wound up veering off course. So I started off at John Portman Associates. So a lot of people know John Portman's buildings. They're all over the world, a lot in China and in the US. And then, hopped around a couple of times for different architecture firms, and wound up somehow falling into being a change manager / BIM consultant / whatever. And basically what happened is this Revit thing started happening, and the firm I was at was using AutoCAD architecture, which we'll call it BIM, right? And I wound up leaving and saying, this is going to be the next thing. I need to be a part of it. And so I did that for several years. And so a lot of it was, again, it was teaching, it was training, it was business consulting, it was change management. How is this going to change what you do and how you do it? And left that, came back into architecture, and now get to do that on a more localized kind of thing with one firm. And, I loved the consulting. It was great because I was able to consult with everyone from owners to engineers to contractors to you name it. I was able to across the entire AEC spectrum. But it's kind of nice to be able to take that and bring it back just to my own company at this point, and help with those implementations and keep us driving forward in an interesting way. So there's me in a nutshell.
Oh, that's it. But I mean, one of the things that I found super interesting is also the fact that you're there in the beginning, you're seeing change happening around you, right? New exposure to, we'll say, different modeling methods, right, to BIM.
Yep.
And in the meantime, there's a lot of people who are burying their heads in their sand, right? They're burying their head in the sand, and you're there, you see an opportunity, right? And you jump on it. Yeah. What was that like at the beginning in terms of the experience, and what do you think differentiated between you and the other guys who didn't get it, maybe?
I think part of it's just me, right? I've always been the first kid on the block to try the new thing, whatever it was. And some of it too is, I think it's just the way my brain is wired in a little bit. When I was in high school, we went off to a technical college, and they sat us down in front of AutoCAD, 12 or something like that, and they had us draw something on it. And I picked up the mouse and I click, and the instructor comes by behind me. He's like, have you ever used AutoCAD before? I was like, no. So I think things just sort of click in my head a little bit. When I was back at Niles, Bolton Associates, which was, I had worked from being a project architect, project manager, and I wound up being the CAD / BIM manager at that point. It was just, again, the software made sense. And I also knew that, AutoCAD architecture, while it had a lot going for it, it had some issues as well. And I've been keeping my eye on Revit. I really had. And then finally at one point, I think it was the 2007 release or somewhere around in there, where all of a sudden it started to work, and I went, this is a thing. And when you go to the head of the company and you're like, I think we need to do this, and he's like, we're not ready yet. And then it was a really good conversation. I said, I think I need to go do this. This is my thing. And so it was one of those first steps in, I've made kind of my career out of carving out a niche that wasn't there before. And this was that next step. I knew this was going to be a thing. And I don't know that it's one thing or the other necessarily. Like I said, I always attribute most things to that I'm just wired a little differently. And this is one of those things that you get. The other thing about architecture firms is, a lot of the time they just don't have the budget. They don't. They're risk averse, and I get it. And so it was just a step I needed to take.
Okay, incredible. And so how was the transition between really being in, I would say probably a conservative environment where you realize that there's an opportunity, right, to enter, to learn more about Revit and to really dive into BIM, right, and to manage this kind of a process and also kind of try to train other people around you, right, to moving into a very different environment, which is, more of a consultant capacity and ending up working with a lot of other teams. Like, what was that process like? And also, what takeaways did you take from your earlier experiences?
That is a big question. There was a lot of parts of that question. So what was the process like moving into it? I guess is the first piece of it. I'm gonna be honest, I hated it. I absolutely
Good.
Man, I made the wrong choice here. I made the wrong choice. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I think part of it too is I hated Revit when I first really started using it. So the process of learning it, I was used to such a level of control with AutoCAD. AutoCAD architecture, you could just kind of fine tune that thing down to the nth degree. And it was like moving from a manual transmission to an automatic transmission, which I still struggle with to this day. However, with BIM and Revit, it was a learning process in of its own. I realized that this level of control we think we need, we don't actually need. In terms of being able to put together a good set of documents. I think if anything, we tend to fret too much over these little tiny things that don't actually matter in the grand scheme of things of putting a set together. So that was actually an interesting transition, is being able to take a step back and going, okay, are we doing our craft properly to begin with? And then once I started really getting into the actual consultation part of my job, that was fun, and I really enjoyed training too. Training people also taught me a lot about myself in terms of how I think and how I learn, and also how I talk to other people about what it is that I do or what they're trying to learn as well. So it was a really big growing season for me. Those was about 7 years of doing that consulting. It was really amazing, and being able to work with so many different people. So it was also just being able to learn all of that other stuff above and beyond architecture, and seeing how teams come together, how people come together to put things together. I think I told you this when I was talking to you earlier, is like, again, I can teach a monkey how to push a button. Teaching technology is actually not that hard, as long as you know what you're doing. But actually building teams of people, functional teams of people, is really hard sometimes, especially when you're throwing them a curveball, which is, oh, by the way, here's a new thing you also have to use while you're trying to get along. Oof, that's a fun
I
thing
love it
sometimes.
it's easy to teach a monkey how to press the button, but it's hard to get the monkeys into a room. I'm joking, but I mean, seriously, it's getting the right people to collect. And I think that one of the things is, like, I'm thinking for a lot of people listening, like, one of the biggest values that I really enjoyed while talking to you, kind of like one of the big points that people could have takeaways is really how you evolved in terms of your perspective of teaching and training people and applying technology. And that would be a lot of fun right now to deep dive into that. Like, how do you get these people to push the buttons, but together, and to work together and recognize the value of pushing the button? There's so many hurdles along the way.
There are, and I think it starts with a need, right? You're not going to get anybody to adopt anything that's not going to benefit them, their company, their client in some way, shape, or form. They're just not, right? So that's the first thing. The worst people, the worst companies, firms I worked with or had to consult with were the ones that felt like they were truly being forced into this. The market is demanding it, and to remain competitive, we got to go to Revit or whatever. That's a brutal kind of thing to try to coach and mentor someone through. It's like dealing with a 2-year-old that doesn't want to do it. They're not gonna do it. You can try all day, they're gonna win. It's that simple. So really is the business itself, whether it's the leadership, whether it's some group within the company sees a benefit to it. That's the biggest thing. Is that that's the first step, is that we've identified a problem, we need to fix the problem, whatever that problem may be. and then you really start to sit down and think about what that is. Is it a piece of technology? Is it a process? Is it and that's the thing, is that while we consulted on technology, it was a lot of process as well. How does this change what we do? But starting with the technology is, okay, we found a thing. We think this thing is going to do whatever it needs to do to help us be whatever it is that we need to be, or solve the thing that needs to be solved. But that's the first thing. And I think also companies that are successful, they're not trying to boil the ocean, right? They're not looking for something that's going to change everything they do all at once. I mean, you're already, like I said, you're already throwing your team a curveball just by introducing a new piece of software, a new widget, a new something, right? And it puts a stress on the team to begin with. So trying to do too much at once is a really, really bad way to start. So start with something that's really definable for people, and those firms that really had this attitude of, we know that this is something that we need to do and whether it's to remain competitive, or we've heard enough about this that we think this is really going to help us improve our efficiency, it's going to help us improve our documentation, it's going to help us work better with our consultants, it's going to be better out in the field, whatever that is. You got to start with that right mindset. Here's a thing it needs to solve, and we know we need to solve it. Now, what do we need to do? And that's, you start with a really open group at that point that's willing to take on some risk and take on the fact that it's going to be a process, right? None of it is an easy button. I don't care how anybody tries to sell Revit or tries to sell any technology, it's still not an easy button.
Yeah. So you're really like, I'm just making sure we're capturing it. You're really starting with a problem, well-defined, a problem that people feel, a problem that they know exists, right? You're starting from the problem, and also you're not trying to boil the sea, which I love. I love that example. You're trying to focus on something that has, there's a metric, there's something that's well defined, it's very clear. And then you touched upon getting good people in the room. What do you think is like, what's the characteristics of those people? Like
that may actually, honestly, out of everything else we talk about here, that may be the most important thing. Is having a group of people that believe in what it is that's being done. And when I say believe, I mean, you don't necessarily need evangelists. Like, they can't all be evangelists, right? We're going to do this, it's going to be great, it's going to be amazing. It's actually okay to have a couple of naysayers in there, but naysayers that are willing to try. Like, I guess maybe not naysayers, but some skeptics. Like, skeptics are not a bad thing, especially if the skeptics turn during the process. They're like, oh, I wasn't so sure, but dang, this is amazing. But of those people too, you need people to believe in it. You need people to support it, and you also need people that I use the term street cred. They've got some credibility. And I guess a better term now, because when I started all of this, was before the age of influencers. Right, it's an idea of having influencers in the room in some way, shape, or form, right? And at different levels. So, especially if it's a piece of technology that is going to change the company in different ways at different levels, right? So you have your senior people who are really, really believing in it. And I will say this: having senior leadership on board is really super important. That they believe that this is worth the time, worth the money, worth the investment. That helps a lot, because if it's just like, let's just take an architecture firm, obviously, for example. If it's just like the staff level drafters that really want to go here, but nobody else cares about it, it ain't gonna happen. It's just not gonna happen. So it still needs to be a top down and bottom up kind of thing at the same time. But also your project managers, your directors, your staff level people, your all of these people, having someone involved in that matters, not only from the influence factor, that these are people who are respected by their peers, that when they go out and talk about this, people are willing to listen to them, but that they're also adding to that pool of in terms of, they're going to also be able to say, as you're going through this process, here's what's going to change for me, and here's what's going to change for me, and here's what's going to change for me, and that they start to understand it as it's an operational change, right? It's not just technology. So having people who can influence, people who can have some credibility, and really know what they're doing. That is so important. If you don't have I'm not saying you have to have all of that, because sometimes you do have to push something through, but it really helps. It really helps. And it helps if they're at the table early in the process. It's not that they're just being dragged into a room. The big boss man says we're switching to this piece of software, or we're going to start using this thingy in the field, whatever that is, this new something. And they're like, nobody talked to me about it. Right. So also, when you're defining that problem, start assembling a team right then, right there, so that you have input across the board. And so you're starting to build the support for it. And that is one of the most important. No single person is going to be able to push something through. You have to have the support net that helps push that process along and keeps building more support as you go through. That's what makes it successful.
I think also one of the very insightful things that I'm also thinking about, and that from what you're saying also, it's not only about putting the right team and in place, right? It's also, and being able to work with them and them having the right mindset, but it's also being able to identify, like you were saying, there's a senior management, and at the same time you're talking to to maybe the project managers or people who are going to be on the executing, right? Executing the projects, and all of them have different needs. And you need to really be relating, right? And it all comes back to the need. But you'll have to everyone needs to understand how that need meets them, right? And then those people that have that need, they need to be able to, like you were saying, influence, right, other people who share their needs or share their challenges with them, and explain how it's solving it for them at each level. And so,
When I was, doing the Autodesk reseller thing, Autodesk does a really good job of also helping us in the channel learn how to do that change management, learn how to build that kind of stuff. And the one thing that really did stick, and I think I had done this subconsciously for a while, because even back before I was doing the consulting, having to change even within your own firm, you're building that support, but they always had the 3 P's: purpose, process, payoff. Why are we doing this? How are we going to do this? And what the heck are we getting out of this in the end? And if you can't define all 3 of those, then you got a loser. You're not gonna get anywhere.
I love it. So it's the right. We said purpose, process, payoff, and every person needs to be able to relate to it, right? At their own stage and their level of engagement with the product.
Because it also, there's a disconnect sometimes between upper management and people actually doing the work, is that they may see, they got the Kool-Aid, right? They got the presentation looks amazing. Oh my God, we can do so much with this thing. And then you actually show it to the people who are actually be using it, they're like, really? Wow, no. It's not gonna hurt. Or vice versa, is that these guys, these people see a need for it that these guys don't understand. And so again, being able to sell up or sell down within your own company, but again, meeting in the middle to get everybody to support it, that's a really big part of it. It's again, the psychology is more important than the technology in almost every instance when you're doing this.
I love it. It's such it's always really interesting to kind of, there's a lot of people are very process oriented, and so they really look at it as a process problem, and they have a big challenge with the people element. And then there's a lot of people are people, but at the end of it, it's also the process. There's this discrepancy between, between understanding the requirement or the necessity of bringing both of these people and process, connecting it the right way together, so there's a good payoff. I'm also super excited to dive in. Let's take an actual example or an actual scenarios in which maybe one of the experiences and in which you guys are implementing a new product, and kind of how that experience looks like or plays out for you.
Trying to do a specific example, I don't know. But yeah, I can give you an overview of it essentially, right? Mm-hmm. So let's take again adopting a new CAD application or something like that, right? So we've already gotten past the point we know we need to do this, right? So now, which one? Because that's part of it too, is trying to figure out what is the best solution to the problem. And a big company may have the luxury of actually custom building something, right? The rest of us don't. You got to find something that's out there and potentially work with it. You got to,
which is sometimes the resource curse is also an issue, because some people, they could build a product, they end up spending years building a product and finding out that there's someone that their business is to build a product and they've done a great job at building it and they had to burn out a lot of cash. So sometimes, not always, but for most of the times, I think it's a good problem to have.
I spent a short time. I left architecture again. We call it my sabbatical, and I went and worked for a software startup. And they're working on a good product. I eventually came back to architecture, but it was amazing to me. I think people oversimplify how hard it is to actually make a piece of software. We would get in discussions like, well, this really needs to be looked at in like a table, like Excel or whatever, and we've got it like this, and you find out exactly how hard it is to just make a table in a piece of software. You're like, yeah, man, custom building a piece of software or something is really, it's an undertaking. It's a huge undertaking that, again, unless you're a really big company with really specific needs, it's not worthwhile for most people. But finding the right thing, and also if you're big enough, this is interesting too, is you might be able to partner with that company and say, look, we really love your product, but we wish it could do this, this, and this. That's also something that company may, again, depending on the size of your company, may want to take on, or as a customization kind of piece, or heck, you may have given them a really good idea to help sell their software more, or their whatever that technology is more. Like they think, well, if a company like this is going to ask for this, then other companies might, and so boom, there it is, magically appears in the next release or the next version or whatever it is. And then once you have that nailed down, you really just need to test it, right? Just do a small test. Whenever I'm looking at a new piece of software for my company, I download it, I play with it, and I put it through the paces. Like if I got a 30-day trial, for 30 days, I am beating the stuffings out of that piece of software, trying to figure out what it can do, what it can't do. I watched the YouTube videos, and like I said, it was my job when I was doing technical pre-sales to make that piece of software look magical, right? And it's smoke and mirrors and sleight of hand. I'm not saying the software didn't do what I was doing, but I made it look like easy, right? Just like wow, and you have a building like that. And it was a lot of sleight of hand sometimes. I think there was one demo that I was giving, and I had a really good rapport with the salesperson that I was on the road with, and she was able to kind of distract them a little bit, almost like the magician's assistant. She was able to distract them, and when they're talking, I'm hitting away on this thing, and she brought her attention back to me, and I hit one button, boom, something popped up on the screen, and somebody in the back went, like, sold, we nailed it. So
the sound of astonishment, it's like it's a win. We got it.
That never ever happened to me again, but that was like that is a good demonstration when I can make somebody in the audience gasp. But that's the job, right? That's the technical pre-sales job, is to make the software look really good. Again, what happens with it, you have to look at any technology almost as a living creature, right? There's the creature in the zoo, the creature in the pictures, how it functions and everything else. And then there's what happens when you put it in the wild, right? In the wild being your project, your environment. How does it actually work there? So put it through its paces, have a really tight team that kind of looks at it and pokes it as much as they can. And if you're happy with what you've gotten out of it, now you have a pilot, get a pilot project. Really focus, pick a project that's not too big, not too small, and I've been through both where, we picked the wrong pilot project on something. It was 1 million square feet of the first type of building of this thing that we've ever done in our entire lives. Yeah, let's try a new piece of software on it too. No, bad idea. Stick to something that you kind of know the outcome of, right? This is a project type, this is a construction type, this is something that we've done repeatedly. We know the outcome, we know how it's supposed to function, and it's easier to start understanding metrics about that thing, right? Even if you can't get hard numbers on certain things with a metric, you can talk to that team and say, yeah, this thing's going a heck of a lot smoother. We can't actually necessarily put numbers on it, but I can tell you the guys are happier, the whatever's going better. And yes, we also have some of these metrics that can, so yeah, pick something that you know really, really well. And then, part of the problem with that too is the training. If you go to training, all the training that I ever did, we'd have, our basic training, our intermediate training, our advanced training. If you went through all of those trainings, you still don't know anything in the grand scheme of things. You know enough to be dangerous. You can push the buttons, but you really don't know the software. You don't understand, all the nuances, the ins and outs, the traps. So, if you can get an advisor, a technical advisor, and a true consultative advisor, and, I warn people on this as well, is that it's and this is going to sound bad because it's going to sound like I'm kind of trash talking, the companies themselves. But the reality is you want somebody who's somewhat independent to be able to advise you on it, right? They're not trying to toe the party line, right? This is the greatest software ever. No, you want somebody who can look at it with a little bit of removal from it. Like, no, you've picked the software. I want to help you get where you're at on the software, but I also want to talk to you realistically about it. These are going to be some of the limitations. These are the things you've got to think about changing in your processes and things like that as you're using it. But somebody who can help guide you, mentor you, and consult you through that first project as well. You shouldn't try to go it alone. That's one of the things I do like about people who have channel partners, right? You're not dealing directly with the software company, you're dealing with another partner that also sells different softwares and is really more intent on being a consultative person that can help somebody through that. And they're going to laugh with you, they're also going to tell some jokes, they're also going to be honest with you, hopefully, about this needs to change. Yes, this was awful, but here's the deal. And their whole job is to keep that divot, that productivity divot from being too extreme. You're gonna take a hit on a project. That's the other thing too. When you're in a pilot, you may see some improvements, you may not see some improvements in certain areas, but you're like, okay, now that we've done this once, we totally understand what to do next time, and I can absolutely see us improving and getting rid of the dip in productivity. But it's the first time you try anything, you're not going to be great at it. So having somebody help you through that whole process really does keep you from sliding into panic territory, right? Because that's the other thing about a pilot project. So many companies I worked with were like, well, we're just going to keep a plan B in case this doesn't go well. By giving your team the crutch, they also have no impetus to make this pilot successful, right? Well, we can always fall back to AutoCAD. We can always fall back to a hammer instead of this really cool thing that we just got to hammer nails in the field, right? No, you want to give them a reason to also be successful, not just from their own desire, but the fact that, look, man, this is the way we're heading. I need you to really invest in this and make it work. And also, if this is a failure, it's a failure. Not every implementation, even if you follow all the right rules and do all the right things, will it be successful? Because like I said, we go back to my statement about this technology. When you put it into your environment with your processes, there's only so much you can know by doing a demo, right? Or having a 30-day trial period or something like that. But even if it's not a complete success the first time around, did you get something out of it that you can also say, okay, no, it wasn't actually the software's problem. It was, again, how we do things. So can we tweak our business model? Can we tweak our processes that works better with this? Because we saw advantages here, 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 and here. And I don't want to lose those advantages, but does changing what we do also help everything and slot everything together? And that's the biggest thing is all these other hidden things that go into making a successful pilot. It also requires a little bit of introspection on your company's part. Is this something worth changing for us if this new thing is requiring us to change it? And that's something that I do on a daily basis, even here at the office, is this constant, is there a new thing? Is what we're doing still the right way of doing something? Is there a new something? Is there a better way to do it? Is there, whatever. So, any company that's not doing that kind of 360-degree, thought process, and you don't have to do it all the time, but, about every year to every 5 years, 1, 3, 5 years, I'm really starting to look at our, even Revit. Is there something that's coming along better out there that I haven't heard of yet? And then, is it worth changing everything we do and how we do it to switch over to this new thing, right? So, but it's still worth looking at. And then after you go through all of that stuff, this is the one thing, and this is also where companies fail, is now you've got this team that really knows what they're doing on that software. Break them up and send them to 2 teams now and have them start training and mentoring, because there's 2 things that happen with that. Number one, this new group is learning from people they also respect, right? So they're willing to learn. It's not some outsider telling them how to do something. It's their own people that are telling them how to do something. And the other thing too is, you don't actually know something until you can teach it to someone else. Mm-hmm. And I stand by that statement. You will know exactly how well you know something when you try to explain it and get somebody else to do it. You're just mastering it even more when you're trying to teach someone else. And there you go. That's roughly the whole process. And again, whether it's software or a piece of technology or what, again, it could be a widget, it could be something for in the field that a contractor might be using. The process is very much the same, is how you get it pulled together.
Okay, I love it. It's a really good and interesting breakdown. I'd say that there's a lot of the steps along the way that people could relate to, and I think one of the when things go well, it's rosy, and it really does. so maybe we could discuss, like, what do you think is like the biggest hurdle, in terms of really approaching this, and think about right now the skeptic in the room, right? Mm-hmm. And his or their their pushback against the process. Like, what is probably we'll even pack this into 2, the largest pushback, and what is the biggest demotivator for, we'll say, the skeptics to make a change?
One of the phrases that I hear all the time, and I absolutely hate it, is, well, that's just the way it's always been done. If we kept doing things the way they'd always been done, we would still be using mules. We would still be, wouldn't have any of the innovations. And so that's the first thing. But really, a lot of the times with skeptics, again, if we go to the psychological side of why a skeptic is a skeptic, there's usually some personal fear there, right? I'm going to become useless. I'm going to lose my job. Mm-hmm. And it's really sit down with them and understand what that fear is and why that's holding them back. And if it is, I'm concerned that my job will become, a thing of the past or whatever it is. Is that the case? I don't know. Maybe not. But I think there's still pathways around, right? If you're an important part of your company, there's also places for you to grow. So maybe that's not, maybe that part of your job might be eliminated by this new thing, but your knowledge, your experience, everything you still bring to the table is still very valuable to that company. Let's find a new way to utilize it. Or maybe it's that you're interpreting this wrong, right? This is not getting rid of your job. This is helping you do your job better. There was a tool that we were looking at that was a generative design type tool that just helps lay out site models, right? So we have a performa from our owner. We need this many units and blah 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 blah. And this was a really cool piece of software. And I showed it to our designers, and the designers were immediately like, "No, I'm worried that's gonna, we're gonna get rid of that. That you're gonna get rid of us if we do this." But when you stop and think about it, it's like, actually, what this is allowing you to do is explore a whole bunch of different options very quickly. Like, how long would it take you to draw out these, 10 variations on this? And like hours and hours and hours. Like this thing just banged it out in 5 minutes. And now you can look at it and go, I kind of like that layout. Now let's take that layout, and now you, the human in the room, build upon that. We eventually didn't get the piece of software, but that was part of the discussion, right? But bringing people to see why, what their skepticism is. And there's no real set answer as to why they feel that way, but 90% of the time it's because they're afraid. They're afraid they're going to be outmatched, or they're going to be eliminated, or this or that or the other. And again, it goes back to psychology, not technology. And just being willing to sit down and listen and understand where those holdups are. And a lot of the times that tends to be it. And there may be some other reasons that they think it's too expensive, or too this or too that. And again, that can be proven with some hard numbers or with some good testing and things like that. Is that, that's the other big thing. It's too expensive. We don't have the money for that. We don't have this. We don't have that. And that may very well be the case too. But it's still a matter of really working through those.
I'm sorry. So we could say, okay, one of the biggest pushbacks, right, that you're referring to is the fear, and maybe even the fear of being replaced or becoming redundant, right? To an extent, and really kind of what I really like about the example, and I think it's a great one, like generative AI, whether it's there.
I was going to mention that.
Whether it's there or not, right? How's it going? Are people going to be replaced, or are these going to be tools that are going to amplify people's ability to do more, right? And the humanistic, like, you're just kind of referring, like, there's a humanistic, like, after the generative AI does its role, then you're still going to have to. There's still a lot of work to do. It's not right, and even to an extent with these tools that could amplify what people are capable of doing. There's going to still be so many overlooked flaws, probably, right? That are going to rely, at the end of the day, on people's ability to even relate to the design. Maybe the taste of the design is going to change. There's going to be so many different things that are going to be required from people to be. Right?
Yeah, people look at the negative effects all the time. And I think it's very easy to look at the negative effects, right? We're going to lose our jobs. They're going to do this, they're going to do that, but you stop and think about it. And a lot of people are saying this about AI, obviously, right now, that, they're artists, there's going to be no artists, there's going to be no writers, there's going to be, none of that is perfect. And if you start looking at it as what it is, which is a tool, then you start to understand that actually this allows me to grow. This allows me to focus on things. And see, we have the same conversation around my current office, which is, how far do we automate something, right? Because there's a danger in automation, right? It's a stupid factor, right? When the AI or the piece of software figures out everything for you, you're not using your professional brain anymore, right? You need to still do your job as a professional, as a whether that's building something, designing something, whatever that is. The AI, the tool, doesn't have that built into it, and people kind of become complacent. They accept that number that pops out of that magic calculator unquestionably. And so there's also a balance to that, but I think that's where, if that's a wise usage of AI, which is I can use it to generate an idea, I can use it to generate a layout, I can use it to generate text, a video, a whatever that is. I still need to be in control. I can't just take that thing and run with it. It still needs to be reviewed. It still needs to be understood. And no doubt about it, it's going to be in everything and everywhere, in no time flat. It already is starting to get there. But the human factor of that professionalism, that mastering of something, that AI doesn't get nuance. It's still a machine in the end. It doesn't get the rest of it. And so, but it also opens up opportunities for, like, I think about Midjourney, right? So you can make these amazing pieces of artwork. I've tried Midjourney. I get junk out of it. And after doing a whole lot of research, I got some ugly images. I mean, they were fine, but they weren't like what I was seeing being posted, right? It's like, wow, how the heck did they get that? And I kept trying. And then I realized that I wasn't good at writing prompts. The people who are getting amazing images out of there, they're artists in their own right. And they're artists in that they can write these incredibly descriptive stories that makes the AI go, ooh, I'm going to put this thing out there. So that's a new skill set. That's something you can train somebody on. That's something that also requires experience. So, your quality control people still are necessary because they need to program it. They need to teach it. So nothing's being replaced. It's opening up different opportunities that you might not have seen sometimes. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
No, it's a great answer. It's a great answer. And I also love the example. Given we're towards the end of the podcast, we always ask, where do you see the future going? And yeah, what's the future looking like?
I see a couple different things. So certainly AI, for example. I think AI is, again, as an assistive technology, whether that be in design, because I think a lot of it too is the software has gotten very, very complex. I think a lot of designers still struggle with that. The designers don't necessarily tend to be computer people, right? They're designers. They're far more artistic. Their brain doesn't necessarily work with buttons and things like that. They want to create, right? So I think having AI be assistive in nature in the design software would be cool, where it can start making some assumptions for you. That when I draw this line, that's a wall. When I draw it like this, it's whatever. So you can start maybe assisting that process instead of people having to hunt down the button, at the top or the side or wherever the heck the button is. I just want it to work. So I think helping simplify the complexity of some of the software and some of the tools down would be a good thing. And also, again, with generating ideas and design and things like that, and we talked about that already, but I think 3D printing is going to be another huge thing coming along. I love the 3D printed houses that I'm seeing, but I also, the ability of 3D printing to do more things and customized things. Like, I've thought about, metal 3D printing for some of the stuff that we might want to do in our designs and things like that, whether it's a structural member. I think that kind of almost maker kind of ideology, the designer maker, it's not about necessarily sourcing something anymore. It's about having it produced right there on site or by a company, and it's exactly what you need. So I think that's a waste reduction thing. That's, you wind up getting perfect fits. You can couple that with maybe augmented reality. I think AR is going to be another huge thing too. I love the ability to just see, right now it's on the phone, right? You can hold it up and go, okay, the piping goes here along the ceiling, or whatever it is. Imagine having that integrated into the construction helmet, right? You walk through into the construction site, and boom, there the building is virtually. You can, change layers and turn things on and off. You can, if you're doing framing that day, here are the framing pieces you need. They're numbered. They're actually right where you need them to be. There's no thought put into it in terms of getting measurements wrong or things like that. You couple that with like RFID technology that, this is, it's like putting a puzzle together. It's like build by number. You need 14 piece number twos, grab 14 of those and put them here, here, and here. I think that ensures safety, it's efficiency, it's all sorts of gains on that. So I think AR is going to be a huge thing. And I actually have a friend that does swarm robotics. I still think there's a possibility for something like swarm robotics. Like, think about a whole thing of little things running around putting bricks. They know how to work with each other and work around each other. So I think there's a whole bunch of interesting technologies that are coming along. But I think, AR and AI, as well as, some of the other things we talked about, those are my two big ones that I can see really being huge helper things in the future on multiple different fronts, in my opinion.
Pete, I love it. I think there's actually so much you almost opened up a Pandora box for me to start talking about 3D printing, but you can't go there.
Oh, that's a huge,
I love time.
That.
Okay, Pete, thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Guys, hit the like button, comment, share, and leave any questions that you may have.
Awesome.